Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
All right, we're starting to learn more about Mark Judge. He's the third person that Professor Christine Blasey Ford alleges was in the room when she says Brett Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her in high school. Judge says the situation that Ford alleges never happened, but I want to take a look at who this guy, Mark Judge, is. He and Kavanaugh attended Georgetown Prep together, graduating in the early 1980s. In an interview with the New York Times, Judge cites their private school experiences and Catholic upbringing to dispute Professor Ford's allegations, saying something like that, a drunken assault at a party, would stick out. But Judge's own writings recount hazy, drunken partying, including a bachelor party featuring a music teacher, students chugging beer, and all of them being, quote, entertained by the stripper. His other book, entitled Wasted, Tales of a Gen X Drunk, talk about a Bart Kavanaugh getting drunk and vomiting in the backseat of a car, leading to speculation that the passage uses a pseudonym for Brett Kavanaugh. And Judge's high school yearbook, quote, appears to endorse violence against women, and at least one other caption in the yearbook seems to make light of the issue, all things Judge would have had control over as the yearbook's caption editor. Later in life, according to Judge, he found the error of his ways, getting sober, getting back into religion, and briefly teaching at Georgetown University. But he also advocated for a, quote, ambiguous middle ground when it comes to consent and what he called, quote, the wonderful beauty of uncontrollable male passion. It's the discrepancy in Judge's defense of Kavanaugh that they were good Catholic private school boys just playing sports and doing schoolwork against his other writings about the same time, where Judge says he drank heavily, quote, lusted after girls, and his views on how men should treat women. All of this could make things like this quote Kavanaugh made in 2015, reflecting on a saying that he and his classmates had take on new meaning.
We had a good saying that we've held firm to this day, as the dean was reminding me before the talk, which is what happens at Georgetown Prep stays at Georgetown Prep. That's been a good thing for all of us, I think.
All right, that's what
I'm just taken one more time.
The wonderful beauty of uncontrollable male passion.
Of uncontrollable male passion.
Yeah. He wrote that. All right, joining us now is Washington Post reporter Avi Selk, author of an article that digs into Mark Judge's background. Avi, thanks for joining us. This is a guy who has spent a good amount of time.
Again, we have to remember, we're talking about Mark Judge. We are not talking about Brett Kavanaugh.
His name happens to be Judge, Mark Judge. And he's a guy who has written a lot about women. And he has expressed what he thinks women's role in society is. What's the Cliff Notes version of this?
The Cliff Notes is... He's never used the words, but he's the type of person that are sometimes referred to disparagingly as men's rights activist. He writes a lot about his notion of femininity and masculinity, whereas masculinity is like a man being a man, that quote about unbridled male passion. Yeah. He's a fan of, movie scenes of guys, violently taking women and doing things to them.
Huh. All right.
Maybe all that self-loathing is why he got blackout drunk so often.
We went over a little bit of Mark Judge and Brett Kavanaugh's high school days, thanks in large part to your reporting. There seems to be some conflict here in terms of the good Catholic prep school boys versus party animals.
Yeah, there sure is. So when Mark Judge was asked about the allegations against Kavanaugh, he kind of said, like everybody else, is a good down-the-middle Catholic school. His memoirs, and he's written at least 2 memoirs, are totally the opposite, that it was drugs and sex and Catholic boys chasing Catholic girls, people passing out at parties, and, this is the guy that was in Kavanaugh's high school class and running around with him at the time. And
so we understand Mark Judge is saying that this didn't happen, but he's not willing to testify. Is that the case?
That's correct. Mark Judge is not willing to testify. He's given a very short statement, a couple to reporters, a couple to the Senate, saying that I have no recollection of this and respect my privacy.
Respect my privacy, except he came out and made a statement. So which one is it, Mark?
Yeah. So what have you talked to either of, at the time that we talked to Emma Brown the other day, the Washington Post hadn't spoken to, obviously, Brett Kavanaugh about this. What's Mark Judge said? Has he been able to talk to you about it?
No, I haven't got through to Mark Judge. I don't think that he's talking to reporters much anymore. I think he's written his letter to the Senate, and, in the Senate Republicans' words, he said what he's going to say, and the Republicans don't think that there's any need to bring him out and put him under oath.
Well, he said what he said, but not under oath. In your colleague Emma Brown's article, she says that Christine Ford cites 2 other people at the party. Have you reached out to them?
I've not talked to either of them. At least one of them has, I think, just maybe this morning been contacted by another outlet, and also said that he has no memory of the party, doesn't remember it being there, and also does not want to testify or talk about it more. So there's one more person. It's important to remember the Judge is the only other person that was in the room, according to Ford.
It is Thursday, the 20th of September of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, folks. That's right, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Oh my, oh my, oh my. Hey! Another day. Another news overload. How do we survive? Because we're Americans. We can take it. Yeah, I keep hearing, the destruction of democracy as we know it. No, it is not the destruction of democracy as we know it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be known as the Great Experiment. The great scientist in the sky has added a component, maybe a caustic ingredient, just to see how the base of the experiment would react. And I think when you awaken the sleeping bear, the sleeping giant, bad things happen to, the entity that nudged the giant awake. Isn't that how it always is? And I believe the giant has been roused from its slumber. Oh, hey, let me tell you about unbridled male passion. Unbridled male passion gets people hurt. That's why you don't want unbridled male passion. Unbridled male passion is like the big silverback ape smashing through the woods. That's unbridled male passion. Okay, just saying. I thought that as, higher up on the pyramid of awareness, where we are ostensibly at the pinnacle, that we didn't fall prey to that animal part of us. Come on. Catholic boys. Give me a break. I was a Catholic boy, and I got to tell you, the kind of Catholic boys that Kavanaugh and this Mark Judge guy were, I know exactly who they were. And it was one of the reasons probably why I decided to, maybe be head of a gang of kids that took on the bullies who kept bullying the kids. I don't know. I always noticed that when confronted, they withered like a dried up flower, which is what they were. You know, all flash, hardly any strength in that stalk, because there was no, and just bear with me as I continue these metaphors, there was no moral fiber to their structure. It was all impulse. It was all unbridled male passion. And what comes of that? Things get broken. People get hurt. Maybe we shouldn't succumb to our unbridled male passion. I thought, even as a kid, it just seemed stupid. Because, once again, it was picking up the pieces afterwards, and why break them in the first place? Why couldn't people make that leap of, if I succumb to my unbridled male passion, I'm going to have to pick up the pieces later. And you never know when later is. And now they do. And, well, they don't call it the Great Experiment for nothing, do they? What's on the rest of the menu? Well, we'll tell you here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy's Bistro Cafe. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, by the way. I know I could have used barley, but I love grits. A Colorado Democratic candidate for the state Senate was shot at while sitting in her truck, and she says she's been getting harassed for months. A black Wisconsin candidate for state representative was reported as a suspected drug buyer while she campaigned in a white neighborhood. Well, of course, she looked out of place. And, adding closure to all of this segment here is the Florida GP is horrified to learn that, well, women curse. And why wouldn't they curse? I mean, come on. They're people. Aren't we all? After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Greece is set to move 2,000 refugees to the mainland from an overcrowded camp on the island of Lesbos. Why? Because of increasing suicide attempts by children. Don't let DHS know. They might try to encourage that here. And Alexander Hamilton was obsessed with the threat a presidency like Trump's posed for America. Well, yeah, it can't happen here, except when it does. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Go to our homepage at netrootsradio.com. You will notice links to find out if you are registered to vote. And if you are not registered to vote, you can then register to vote. And it's very important because you never know if you've been kicked off the rolls. These are entities of evil. And they cannot win the game by playing by the rules. They just can't. And even when they break the rules, they need even more help, sometimes from a hostile foreign power. And even then, they can barely eke out the win. So they only work in the margins, as I've mentioned before, and it's, I don't know. Let's rout them. Jesus. There's a lot of people who hated John Wooden. If you're of a certain age, you would know what I mean. Because, his UCLA teams won all the time, as if that was a bad thing. And every now and then, John Wooden, he wasn't, a man of flamboyance, shall we say. But he would, sometimes train his group to be quite efficient in their play, and they would score a lot, and the other team wouldn't. And it wasn't because the other team was unable to shoot because they were bad shooters, because, well, his teams played defense too. So, that means, on all fronts, people, on all cylinders, let's rout them. Let's open up this first offering here in the... Oh, wait a second. I have to continue here. I'm not done. I have to tell you then about the chat room link at the bottom of the homepage at netrizradio.com, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. That's one way to engage us. Please do. Go to the leftish of the homepage there at netrizradio.com from the chat room link, and you will notice the contribute button. Please become a Patreon. Actually, this is the one, the most important part of what I have to do here, and that is... make this entreaty that we're not getting the Soros check. And I should say checks. I've been waiting for my Soros checks really for quite a while. And when I say quite a while, I mean, just around it would be a couple of years after Watergate. Yep. And I just think of the interest that I could live on just on that alone. Oh my God. It would be a life of luxury. And what would beget then? Well, we don't want to find out. But that Soros check is not coming in, and we need help from you. And we are unable to do it without you, and thank you for your generosity. Do follow the show on Twitter at Netriz Radio. We are on Facebook, of course, and Kelly Lincoln has been taking care of the Facebook Live thing there. Thank you, Kelly. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos, where I can be found as Justice Putnam. Quite simple. And that diary, by the way, is a very important part of the show. We're a multimedia production here. And everything fits. All right. I hope. It's supposed to have an arc. Alrighty. All right. So follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. We are on Facebook, West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And pick up podcasts of the show by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, YouTube, etc., etc., etc. Okay, now we are going to dive into this first offering here. At the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Brad Reed of Raw Story. And since I'm not buying a subscription to Raw Story, I have to let their ads pay for their way, or my way. And just have to let it load a little bit before you can scroll. So bear with me. Okay, I guess we can do this now. Rebecca Cranston, a Democratic candidate for state senate in Colorado, has told police that someone shot at her truck almost as soon as she parked it in her driveway late last week. The Coloradoan reports that Cranston was sitting in her driveway talking on her phone when she heard a loud noise. It didn't occur to me that it would be a gunshot at first until we saw the bullet hole, she explained. Yeah. It's not clear, according to the Coloradan, if Rebecca Cranston was targeted or if the shooting was related to other reported shootings in northwest Fort Collins, where the Democratic candidate resides. It's not a specific threat to her. It's just the general shooting of guns where people and property get damaged. So don't worry. It's just the general stuff. That's the everyday kinds of shootings that occur in the northwest Fort Collins area where she resides. Okay, that's good to know. Cranston reported the shooting to the Larimer County Sheriff's Office, which says that it is in the initial stages of investigating the shooting, which may be related to two other unsolved shootings that occurred in the area earlier this spring. Really, it's taking them that long. Cranston claims that she has been subjected to harassment during the course of her campaign, which she said has included people staking out her house and stealing her mail. Well, that's a classic Republican rat-fucking operation. We've seen this before. Looks like they have a lot of brown shirts going out there intimidating others, don't they? Yes, they do. I don't really feel safe here, frankly, she said. Oh, well, I think that's the key. It's called terror. Writing on Facebook on Wednesday, Cranston further said that in the last 9 months, I have filed 3 police reports following disturbing incidences of harassment, including someone following and photographing me in my home. Well, maybe that was just the cops. They do that now. She could be considered the opposition, and they're just keeping tabs on her. Make sure she's not going to do anything wrong. She did add, however, that she does not believe her Republican opponent, Rob Woodward, had anything to do with the shooting that took place at her house. Just not the shooting. Travis Geddes, also of Raw Story, brings us this next offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Well, there's a lot of things that you can't do while being black, and there's a lot of things you can't do while being black and being a woman at the same time. There's just a lot of things you can't do, and apparently one of them is, campaigning for office. Because, it's just not done in proper society, apparently. A Wisconsin woman who's about to become her county's first black state Senate representative was questioned by police as she introduced herself to voters in a predominantly white neighborhood. Apparently not her constituents, they think. A neighbor called police to report 46-year-old Sheila Stubbs, a 12-year veteran of the Dane County Board of Supervisors, as a possible drug buyer as she was knocking on doors one Tuesday evening in August when she spotted a patrol car parked alongside hers. Well, I don't know, maybe it had nothing to do with her being black and a woman, but this constituent was afraid that a member of the Dane County Board of Supervisors was a known drug-buying gang. Maybe. I doubt that. It's because she's black, and it's because she's a woman, and that is the scariest of all. All right. Well, dispatcher's notes from an August 7th call said, fully occupied silver 4-door sedan, newer model, thinks they are waiting for drugs at the local drug house. Would like them moved along. The local drug house. Probably the only other black person that lives in the neighborhood. Apparently. Madison police found Stubbs' mother, 71-year-old Linda Hoskins, and her 8-year-old granddaughter sitting in the car as she campaigned for the 77th Assembly District. I belong where I choose to go, Stubbs said. You don't have to like me. You don't even have to respect me, but I have a right to be places. Stubbs said she was heartbroken and humiliated when she explained to her granddaughter why police were questioning her. Of course, they had to handcuff her, too, because there's nothing scarier than a black woman. Okay? Talk about unbridled passion. That is a fearsome, unbridled passion, and we have to be frightened of it. Always. Always. Especially if it's come to seek retribution against all the transgressions that's been imposed. And you would think that with all of that, people would stop, imposing transgressions on people. But no. I don't know. In 2018... It is 2018, Stubbs told the newspaper. I shouldn't be strange. that I, as a black woman, came knocking on your door. I didn't do anything to make myself stand out. I felt like they thought I didn't belong there. Well, yeah. Former parole agent and educator won the Democratic primary election a week later and is effectively the diverse district's representative-elect because she will not face a Republican opponent in November. Yeah, because they're all corrupt. They have to drop out every now and then, don't they? The 77th district covers some of Madison's poorest neighborhoods, as well as some of the wealthiest. And it was represented for nearly 2 decades by Therese Berceau, who endorsed Stubbs after deciding not to run for re-election. Stubbs said she'd been in the neighborhood, which she declined to identify, for about 20 minutes before a man called police to report her as suspicious. Jesus. She said the officer who responded, former social worker Catherine Bland, was courteous, but Stubbs said she felt the need to prove she belonged in the neighborhood by showing her name tag, campaign literature, and list of doors she would knock on. It was so degrading, Stubbs says. It was humiliating and it was insulting. And actually in July, we talked about a black lawmaker here in Oregon, State Representative Janelle Bynum of Clackamas. And she was reported as a possible burglar when she knocked on doors and answered cell phone calls while campaigning in her district. Yeah, don't do that. Rebecca Intralgo of Think Progress brings us this last offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Well, it looks like after all of that, being shot at in your truck, being reported as a drug buyer, or being reported as a burglar, just for, campaigning and being a woman, and worst of all, being a woman of color. Oh, my God. Well, after all of that, the Florida GOP is horrified to learn that women would curse. Yeah. Apparently saying, look at the shit we have to put up with is, according to the GOP in Florida, everything wrong with politics today. Really? I remember when Dick Cheney gave out a big F.U. right there in the well. Yeah, and another representative right there yelled it out. F you. Republican Party of Florida sent out mailers attacking Democratic candidate for House District 47, Anna Escamani, for her vocabulary, saying her vulgar potty mouth is everything wrong with politics today. One side warns explicit materials on opposite side, and the other side of the mailer says explicit language warning, edited to meet decency standards. Yeah, she said, and of course they put asterisks, right? But they capitalize the invectives. In her own words, it says, I don't take shit ever. I look at the shit we have to put up with. Fuck the patriarchy. Is that what she said? Ask yourself, is this the example our leaders should be setting for our children? I don't know. Apparently, yes. I mean, carpool dads who turn out to be creepy pedo types. I know he's not pedo, but creepy, really creepy. Wants his clerks to look a certain way. Yeah, I wonder what that's all about. Handmaid's Tale stuff, maybe. Yeah, that's all right. That kind of creepy stuff's all right. But saying, look at the shit we got to put up with. Well, I say if you're whining about that, it's really bullshit. Isn't it really? Come on. And why are you upset? Because Eskamani is an Iranian American and former senior director for Planned Parenthood of Southwest and Central Florida. That's why. While the mailers were paid for by the Republican Party of Florida, they were on behalf of her opponent, incumbent state representative Stockton Reeves. According to Eskamani, Reeves of the Florida GP used a similar line of attack against Reeves' Republican primary challenger, who is also a woman. Well, of course that's a double standard. In other words, what we like to call bullshit. Let's get to our break. And when we come back, we will go through weather from around the world to just achieve a little bit of balance, yes. And then finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This be Scientific American 60-second science. I'm the Dread Pirate, Steve. I'll be taking a minute of your time. Today, September 19th, is International Talk Like a Pirate Day. No, seriously, yo-ho-ho, check the web, it really is. And when they say talk like a pirate, they don't mean, for example, hey, can you copy these DVDs for me? No, they mean when you talk like this. You know, matey, anyone could be a pirate. All you needed was a proper disrespect for authority and a willingness to be seasick for months at a time. But to be a truly successful pirate and not just the son of a biscuit eater, well, you had to know a bit of science, too. A good pirate captain had to know the astronomy to navigate by the stars. He had to be acquainted with meteorology and know enough fluid dynamics to make sure he didn't overload his ship with booty. And he needed the psychological skills to manage his literally motley crew. Your average pirate ship required a buccaneer surgeon to treat stab wounds and cat-o'-nine-tail slashes, and a swashbuckling general practitioner to make sure the men had the right diet to ward off scurvy with foods rich in vitamin C. Plus, your pirate optometrist supplied the men with eye patches, and of course, advanced veterinary practice. Well, what do you mean my time's up? I'm a pirate. I don't care if my time's up. Advanced veterinary practice kept your pirate parrots in fine fettle. So you see me, Hardy, no matter what your chosen path, science is sure to give you a hand. Or at least a hook. Thanks for the minute for Scientific American 60-second science. I'm the Dread Pirate, Steve.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. America during the 1700s was a place of immense natural resources, such as land, timber, animals, and water. The American colonies were far from Great Britain, which allowed freedom to flourish. Given the abundant natural resources and freedom the colonists enjoyed, natural rights philosophy strongly influenced many of the American founders. Natural rights philosophy held that people have basic, individual rights, such as those to life, liberty, and property. Some writers argued that certain of these rights cannot ever be taken away and that people create governments to protect those rights. The American founders, such as George Mason and Thomas Jefferson, were strongly influenced by natural rights philosophers such as John Locke. This passage from the Virginia Declaration of Rights, written by George Mason, was later echoed in the Declaration of Independence, which Thomas Jefferson began drafting 1 month later. That all men are by nature equally free and independent, and have certain inherent rights, of which, when they enter into a state of society, they cannot, by any compact, deprive or divest their posterity, namely, the enjoyment of life and liberty, with the means of acquiring and possessing property, and pursuing and obtaining happiness and safety. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
Do we want to minimize or maximize the chances that a person who is being released from prison can lead a successful and law-abiding life on the outside? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Over 90% of persons in jails and prisons today will be released. And it is undisputed that family and friend visits to a person behind the razor wire is crucial. Visits are the fragile lifeline which allow a person in prison to maintain a support system in the community, which is what will allow him or her, in most cases, to have a chance to succeed after his or her release. In 2018, the allegedly liberal state of Massachusetts instituted a new system to restrict inmate visitation by friends and families, making Massachusetts now one of the most restrictive states in the country with regard to prison visitation. As Jesse White, an attorney with Prisoners Legal Services of Massachusetts, said, quote, "The evidence supports that efforts should be made to make visitation more open and more accessible whenever possible. But that is not what the Massachusetts Department of Correction has been doing. It is doing the opposite." Hopefully, the lawsuits challenging this new policy will succeed. If they don't, the prisoners and their families will pay a big, big price. And so will everyone else. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
Shame is that queasy feeling you get when you realize you've done something improper, ridiculous, or just flat out contemptible. But it's socially invaluable, for feeling ashamed is a built-in jerk alarm, keeping most of us from doing the same embarrassing thing again. But what if you're not embarrassed by being a jerk? Sure enough, some individuals who rise to high places are so consumed by self-importance, self-righteousness, self-aggrandizement, and all things selfish that they feel no shame, even when their narcissism does gross harm to others. One example is the clique of prominent polluters, politicos, and propagandists who are climate change deniers. They shamefully use their prominence to enhance their own fame and fortune. While glaciers melt, oceans rise, extreme weather expands, species perish, and Earth itself spins toward being unlivable. Unable to acknowledge shame, they need help. Luckily, a feisty group called Cowboys for Liberty has stepped forward to acknowledge it for them by establishing a Climate Deniers Hall of Shame. Among the first class of infamous deniers are Charles and David Koch, who've dumped more than $100 million into front groups opposing efforts to halt climate change. Senator Jim Inhofe, the dotty old dean of deniers, who has called global warming a conspiracy spawned by the Weather Channel. And the former CEO of ExxonMobil, who secretly funded hooked-up academic reports to discredit the science of climate change. This is Jim Hightower saying, the Hall of Shame is fun, but it's not a prank. It points out that climate change is not only caused by human action, but also by human inaction. And putting names and faces to the small group of humans selfishly preventing progress can help the majority of us see that we can and must rise up to stop them. To help, go to whydeny.org. whydeny.org.
If you'd like more of Jim Hightower's real populism, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter gives you the real lowdown on which corporations, by name, are doing what to the middle class, our environment, and our democracy. Each month, the Hightower Lowdown brings you facts you didn't know, along with actions you can take to fight back. It also comes with a sense of humor. Hightower believes we can fight the gods and still have fun. Plus, get this, it's cheap. Only $15 brings you 12 issues a year. For real populism, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
As of Thursday morning, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, the woman accusing Judge Brett Kavanaugh of sexual assault, still has not decided whether or not to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee on Monday. The 11 Republican men on the committee had issued an ultimatum: testify before the committee or its staff on Monday, or we'll move forward with the plan to put Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court for life. MSNBC's Chris Hayes has more.
They're not even giving Dr. Blasey Ford until Monday. In a letter today, the top Republican of the committee, Chuck Grassley, said that her prepared testimony and biography are due to the committee by 10 a.m. on Friday, September 21st, if she intends to testify on Monday. Last night, through her lawyer, Dr. Blasey Ford requested that the FBI investigate her allegation before she told her story to the committee. And tonight, she is refusing to back down. In a new statement, her lawyer reiterated the call for a full investigation and said that at the very least, multiple witnesses should be included in any proceeding. Attorney Lisa Banks adding the committee is not conducting a fair or good faith investigation and that the rush to a hearing is unnecessary and contrary to the committee discovering the truth. In their rush to confirm Kavanaugh, who categorically denies the allegation, Senate Republicans are ruling out either an outside investigation or testimony from anyone besides Kavanaugh and his accuser. And they are suggesting Dr. Blasey Ford's requests are unfair.
I think it's not fair to Judge Kavanaugh for her not to come forward and testify. Both of them need to testify under oath next Monday before the Judiciary Committee.
That's Senator Susan Collins. One of Ford's objections is that the Republicans are refusing to seek testimony from Mark Judge, who Dr. Ford says was an eyewitness to the assault. Judge has claimed he has no recollection of the incident and does not want to testify. Anita Hill, who was treated horribly by the same committee after she accused Clarence Thomas of sexual misconduct in 1991, suggested she's seeing a similar scenario happening now, 27 years later.
Moving forward on this at this pace, with this kind of sort of black hole of a process being foreseen by many of us, we are really under the impression that the Senate doesn't take this seriously and doesn't see this as part of their core responsibility.
Hill said that the FBI should investigate Ford's claims.
The hearing questions need to have a frame, and the investigation is the best frame for that, a neutral investigation that can pull together the facts, create a record so that the senators can draw on the information they receive to develop their question.
On his way to visit the Carolinas on Wednesday, Trump claimed the FBI just doesn't do that.
Well, it would seem that the FBI really doesn't do that. They've investigated about 6 times before, and it seems that they don't do that.
That isn't true. In fact, as Senator Ed Markey notes, in 1991, the White House directed the FBI to conduct a full, thorough, and expeditious investigation into Anita Hill's allegations against Clarence Thomas. The investigation was completed in 3 days.
Senator Claire McCaskill, who faces a tough re-election bid in Missouri, announced she opposes Kavanaugh's nomination. She said her decision is based on the judge's support for unlimited campaign contributions. Thursday marks the 1-year anniversary of Hurricane Maria hitting and ravaging Puerto Rico. Demonstrators are planning an event outside Trump's Mar-a-Lago property in Palm Beach this weekend. Following South Korean President Moon's trip to North Korea to meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, the Trump administration says the U.S. is ready to resume talks with North Korea, seeking denuclearization by 2021. NBC News has the report.
Kim Jong-un pulled out all the stops to welcome South Korean President Moon Jae-in to North Korea, with cheering crowds, an intimate lunch, and one of those famous, highly choreographed North Korean stadium shows. All for this. Today, both leaders promising to ease tensions, and Kim Jong-un promising to scale back his nuclear weapons program. To turn the Korean peninsula into a land of peace without nuclear weapons and nuclear threats, Kim said. Kim agreeing to close his main missile testing facility, and saying he'll close his biggest nuclear complex if the U.S. takes corresponding measures. North and South Korea also agreed to create a no-fly zone on their border.
Over those mountains there, you can see into North Korea there.
Meaning U.S. Air Force flights like this one we recently joined are, in principle, now no longer allowed.
Prior to becoming president, it looked like we were going to war with North Korea, and now we have a lot of progress.
But North Korea has so far done nothing to get rid of the nuclear bombs it already has. And U.S. intelligence officials have told NBC News they believe North Korea is still making nuclear weapons.
Despite that, Kim is planning to go to Seoul soon, and North and South Korea even say they will make a joint bid for the Olympics. So he's getting a lot, and so far, still keeping his nuclear weapon.
And that's a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. The Australian government's indefinite detention of refugees on a remote Pacific island is driving children to suicide. That was the accusation leveled by Daniel Webb of Australia's Human Rights Law Centre before a session of the UN Human Rights Council on Wednesday.
After 5 years of detention, these children have now lost hope. Some have stopped speaking. Some have stopped eating. A 10-year-old boy recently tried to kill himself.
The more than 1,600 refugees held in a pair of remote camps, notorious for their dire living conditions, didn't end up there by accident, but as the result of Australian laws barring any refugees attempting to reach Australia by boat from ever setting foot in the country. In an interview after his testimony in Geneva, Webb said the 102 children held in Nauru are acutely affected by their detention.
40 of these children have been trapped on Nauru for their entire lives. They're 4 and 5-year-old kids, yet the only world they have ever known is inside an island prison on Nauru.
It's not clear there's an end in sight. A deal between the U.S. and Australia has seen 300 refugees brought to America, but the deal covers just a fraction of those in detention, and it bars any Somalis and Iranians, leaving their fate in limbo.
To be frank, we can see in many places around the world right now that there are cynical politicians who seek power by exploiting fault lines on race and migration. And a consequence of that is that there are 102 children imprisoned on Nauru for the last 5 years. The consequence equally elsewhere in the world will be suffering.
Luke Vargas, The United Nations. Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Yes. Well, let's begin with weather from around the world, and we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently a chilly 45 degrees. Yes, chilly nights, warm days. That's what we have this time of year in this ecosystem and landscape of Southern Oregon. It's raining in other parts of the state, but here, nope, it's not. Dry conditions are continuing. We're right now partly cloudy. Winds are out of the north-northwest at that negligible 1 mile per hour. They will remain light and variable throughout the day and tonight and even tomorrow. We're going to be a bit warmer today than yesterday. We're going to have a high of about 81 to 83, a little warmer. And that will be true for, we're going to even be warmer tomorrow. It should be mid-80s or a tad warmer. Well, we do want to have some rain at some point, but not apparently soon. Pressure is holding right now steady at 30.41 inches. Visibility is around 7 miles because humidity is at 87%. Ragweed pollen is high if you suffer from that, though the air quality index continues to plummet. We're still in the good range at 31 parts per million, but a lot better than it was even yesterday. And that daytime UV index is in the moderate range for this time of year at 5. I would still take care. You never know. All right. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. That's how we do it. Okay. London is 69 and mostly cloudy. And it looks like they do have a thunderstorm and possible flooding advisory. Paris is 78 and sunny. Rome is 79 and partly cloudy, and they have a thunderstorm, electrical storm advisory that could kick out the electrical grid in Rome, so take care. Kiev is 80 and clear. Kabul is 74 degrees and clear. Hong Kong is 79 and clear. Tokyo is 62 with rain. Sydney, Australia is 51 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 55 and fair. And New York, New York is 66 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy on an early, soon-to-be fall day. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Okay, this first offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by D. Parvaz. Now, just as the problem that you heard in the news clip about Australia and these relocation camps, these refugee camps, I don't know what to call them, but they are horrendous places, and so the suicide attempts by kids is the same dynamic here in Greece. The UN has told Greece that you got to start moving these people, and so authorities in Greece say they will move roughly 2,000 asylum seekers from the Moria refugee camp, holding over 9,000 people on the island of Lesbos, to the mainland. While the effort is stated as to ease overcrowding, it comes days after Doctors Without Borders released information on the alarming number of children either self-harming or attempting suicide at the camp. My God. Their staff has found that between February and June this year, nearly a quarter of refugees between the ages of 6 and 18 were being observed as either trying to hurt or kill themselves. Others suffer from panic attacks, anxiety, and constant nightmares. Some are flat out unable to speak. Now, this comports with reporting of Think Progress in February and March when Médecins Sans Frontières alerted Think Progress to rapes and suicide attempts in Moira. In a bid to keep immigrants and refugees out of the EU has struck several deals, all of which have dire consequences for those fleeing war, hunger, or persecution to reach their shores. A deal with Turkey has resulted in a crackdown on the route between it and Greece, forcing migrants to take more dangerous paths. Libyan militias have been paid to keep migrants there, locked up in abhorrent conditions in detention centers. Well, private prison industrial complex goes international with mercenaries. Greece is getting funding to essentially de-incentivize migrants and asylum seekers from their journey by containing them in Greece, and then gradually returning them either to Turkey or to their countries of origin. Except for one thing. What are their countries of origin? Well, the majority of whom are families from Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. What countries are those? All countries torn up by all-out war.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
This last offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays, is by Tom Hartman from Independent Media Institute. Now, this is a very long and comprehensive article, and it is much too long and complex for what is normally offered here as little tidbits, a little amuse-bouche here at the chef's table. But I wanted to give you a flavor of this, and of course the links can be had at the Daily Kos Diary I post about 10 minutes before showtime every day that we have a show. Presidential economic advisor Larry Kudlow suggested to the Economic Club of New York that after the elections, Republicans will target spending on Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid with reforms or cuts to help pay for the massive deficits created by Trump's $1.5 trillion tax cut for billionaires. And trillionaires, too. Can't leave them out. Conservatives have controlled our government for 3 definable periods in recent history. The Gilded Age of the last 3 decades of the 1800s. And then progressives followed from 1901 to 1920 and fixed everything. And then the Roaring 20s, when the Republicans, the conservative Gilded Age type class, destroyed everything again. And then progressives followed from 1933 to 1980, put it all back together. We were booming. We were prosperous. The envy of the world. We had money coming out of our ears. And then the Reagan era started in 1981 and continues to this day. And now we're kind of like a shithole country. Uh-huh. Each conservative era has led to terrible suffering among working people. Each ended in a wipe-out financial disaster. And this one will probably be no different. Oh, I should interject here. I embellish. And I put a little bit of embellishment here. So we'll call some of those embellishments in this reporter's opinion. Okay. So you know. All right. Republicans have already radically cut long-term employment insurance, killed welfare as we know it with the help of Bill Clinton, and cut the budgets of Social Security and Medicare to the point where it's hard to get anybody on the phone. Yeah, try going through their email system. Jeez. They've deregulated much of the fossil fuel industry, sold off public lands to mining and drilling interests, and slashed away at the EPA. But this time there's a larger concern than the survival of the economy, the environment, and the middle class. This time, democracy itself may well be at stake. Well, the 2016 takeover of our government by Trump and his billionaire oligarch cronies could be the nightmare that Alexander Hamilton identified, warned us about, and then refused to believe could ever come to pass. Yeah, well, like I said, Sinclair Lewis said it can't happen here until it does. Well, I say it until it does. Yep. So Hartman then goes through a bit of history, invokes Teddy Roosevelt, Taft, and Woodrow Wilson as the progressive and trust-busting policies, and that the right-wing insanity began then. because, Teddy Roosevelt in particular said, we're muckraking, and we're going to take the word of the muckrakers and find out what the heck is going on. And the gilded class apparently don't care about people or their government or their nation. They're like rats. They eat where they poop. And broke up the trusts, and the rich people didn't like that. Teddy Roosevelt was a traitor to his class, and suffering had to be had, and it was. And Hamilton foresaw this kind of demagoguery that would occur, and didn't think that actually Americans would allow it to go much further. But I think we're in a much more dangerous period because, Hamilton and his ilk only had Ben Franklin's postal service delivering the news. Things are a little bit quicker now and much more embedded, and we have to take care. All right, well, we're going to get out of here. We're at the end of our broadcast period for the day, but Netroots Radio does broadcast on for all that breaking news. We'll visit with you tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Yes, an extra French 77 is in order indeed. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all that breaking news, and we will visit with you tomorrow right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.